The movie starts in Houston, Texas. The year is 1950. We meet a young boy named George. He's poor, hungry, and angry at the world. His family lives in a small house, and they barely have enough to eat. George watches other kids eat in the cafeteria while he sits outside with nothing. At night, George and his siblings sleep on the floor. His mom works hard to feed them all, but it's never enough. George is filled with rage. He hates being poor. He gets into fights at school and skips class. Everyone says he's just a troublemaker. But deep down, he wants more. One day, his mom, Nancy Forman, tries to encourage him. She tells George to pray. She believes God has a plan for him. But George is not ready to hear that. He doesn't trust God. He just wants food and money. As George grows older, he becomes stronger. One day, he nearly kills a man who tries to steal his shoes. He realizes that if he doesn't change, he might end up in jail. That's when he hears about the Job Corps program, a government program for poor young men. George leaves home and joins Job Corps in California. There, he meets a man named Doc Broadus. Doc is a former boxer who now trains young men. He sees potential in George, lots of it. He offers to teach him how to box. At first, George is arrogant. He thinks he's already the strongest. But Doc humbles him. He teaches George to use his strength wisely. He also teaches him discipline. Slowly, George starts to change. He learns to control his anger. He trains harder than anyone. George's talent grows fast. He wins amateur fights and soon joins the U.S. Olympic team. In 1968, he travels to Mexico City for the Olympics. Everyone doubts him. They say he's too raw and inexperienced. But George proves them wrong. He knocks out his opponents one by one and wins the gold medal. He waves the American flag proudly. For the first time, he feels respected. For the first time, he feels like a champion. After the Olympics, George turns professional. He starts fighting for money. And he wins, again and again. His name spreads. People say he might be the next heavyweight champion. He becomes known for his powerful punches and cold attitude. He doesn't smile. He doesn't talk. He just knocks people out. Doc stays by his side, guiding him. But George becomes more focused on money and fame. He buys expensive clothes, fancy cars, and a big house. He forgets where he came from. He starts losing his humility. Then comes the biggest challenge of his life, a match against the heavyweight champion, Joe Frazier. In 1973, George faces Frazier in the ring. Everyone expects a close fight. But George surprises the world. He knocks Frazier down 6 times in just 2 rounds. The fight is over quickly. George Foreman is now the heavyweight champion of the world. George is at the top of the world. He has money, fame, and power. But he still feels empty inside. He keeps training, keeps fighting, and keeps winning, until he meets a new challenger. In 1974, George agrees to fight Muhammad Ali in a match called the Rumble in the Jungle. The fight is held in Zaire, Africa. George is the favorite. Ali is older, slower, and many believe he doesn't stand a chance. But Ali has a plan. He uses a strategy called rope-a-dope. He lets George punch him for several rounds, tiring him out. Then, in the 8th round, Ali knocks George out. George loses his title. And with it, he loses everything, his pride, his confidence, and his identity. After the loss, George becomes bitter. He feels lost. He keeps fighting, but the magic is gone. He's no longer the unstoppable force he once was. He struggles to find his place in the world. Things get worse when he loses to a boxer named Jimmy Young. After the fight, George collapses in the locker room. He's overheated, dehydrated, and near death. As he lies unconscious, something strange happens. George has a vision. He sees himself in darkness. Then he hears a voice of peace, of love, of God. He wakes up screaming, "Jesus Christ is alive in me." Everyone around him is shocked. George, the tough, angry boxer, is now claiming to have found God. A few days later, George gets baptized. He starts going to church and preaching. He tells people about how God saved him. He says he no longer wants to fight. He wants to live for God. His team thinks he's gone crazy. Doc is hurt. He says, "When you walked away, you broke my heart." George tries to explain, "I've found something better. I've found peace." Soon, George leaves boxing completely. He becomes a preacher and starts helping his community. He tries to fix his broken relationships, with his ex-wife, with his children, and with his past. One day, while preaching at church, he notices a woman listening closely. Her name is also Mary. They talk after the service, and soon, they fall in love. George shares his dream with her. He wants to open a church and a youth center. Years pass. George and Mary get married and have more children. He becomes a full-time preacher. He inspires people with his words and actions. He even opens a small gym to help troubled youth. But money problems begin to grow. George's friend and financial manager, Desmond, loses all of George's money by investing in risky stocks. The gym, the house, everything is at risk. The bank threatens to take it all. George feels hopeless. He tried to live right, but he still lost everything. He tells Mary, "I can't preach about faith when we're losing it all." Then, George makes a shocking decision. He wants to return to boxing. Mary is scared. She reminds him that he left boxing behind for a reason. She worries that his old rage might come back. But George is determined. He says, "The only two things I know how to do are box and preach. Preaching won't pay the bills." George goes back to Doc and asks him to train him again. Doc says, "You're too old, George. People will laugh." But George is serious. He's in his 40s now, way past the age of most fighters. Still, he starts training. He struggles at first. His body is slow. He can't keep up. People call him fat and washed up. But George doesn't quit. He works hard every day. Slowly, he gets stronger. Mary even helps him stick to his diet. After months of work, George returns to the ring. At first, no one takes him seriously. They say it's just a circus act. But George keeps winning. One fight after another. Soon, people start believing. Even though he's older and slower, George changes his fighting style. He uses his experience and strength wisely. He stops relying on speed and focuses on timing and power. In one fight, his opponent hits him after the bell. But George stays calm. He doesn't let his anger take over. He's truly changed. After a long winning streak, George gets a chance to fight for the title again. At 45 years old, he faces the young and undefeated champion, Michael Moorer. Moorer is fast, strong, and 19 years younger than George. Everyone says George has no chance. The fight begins. Moorer dominates the early rounds. He lands quick punches, and George barely responds. His team tells him to quit. But George says, "There's no shame in lasting 9 rounds with the best in the world." Then comes round 10. George sees an opening. He lands a powerful right hand. Moorer stumbles. Then George lands another punch, and Moorer hits the canvas. The crowd goes silent. The referee counts, and Moorer doesn't get up. George Foreman is the winner. At 45 years old, George becomes the oldest heavyweight champion in boxing history. A miracle has happened. Against all odds, he's back on top. After the fight, George says, "Thank you, God. We did it." He's not just a champion in the ring. He's a champion in life. The movie ends by showing what happened after. George and Muhammad Ali became close friends. They talked almost every day until Ali passed away. In 1998, Doc Broadus was inducted into the World Boxing Hall of Fame. And today, George continues to preach and run his youth center in Houston. He's a husband, a father, a preacher, a champion. And most of all, he's a man who proved that it's never too late to change.